Hey guys, it's time for my first wrap up of the year. I've already read 7 books. 7 books? I can't count. It's 6 books. So far, I haven't read any books that have like blown my mind, and I've actually only read technically 1 book that I really enjoyed. The rest of them were kind of like meh, and then 1 book I actually DNF'd. I wanted to finish it, but it was so bad that I just couldn't. I'm going to be talking about these books in the order that I read them, starting off with Don't Look Back by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, this book surprised me in many ways. I was procrastinating reading this, and I really just wanted to give it to the library. I actually had 2 copies of the book, and I gave either 1 copy to my aunt or to the library. I'm not 100% sure now. I liked it. I really enjoyed it. I didn't need 2 copies of it though. It wasn't like blowing my mind. I need multiple copies of the book, you know, kind of like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. But I did end up giving this a 4.5 stars on Goodreads, and OMG, it was so good. Well, technically I gave it a 4.5 stars, but I rounded it up on Goodreads, and I'm thinking that I may lower it to like a 4 stars, simply because while it did blow my mind, I don't think it was a 5-star book. But I do think it was a great way to start off the new year. And it was a mystery novel. Technically, I don't know if it actually says on Goodreads whether it's a mystery novel or not, but there's a lot of mystery elements into it, so I'm counting it as one. And one of my goals for this year was to read a lot more mystery and horror books, so I'm already started on that. But my favorite thing about this book is the pacing of it. I know, for like 3 hours straight, and it didn't feel like I had been reading for like 15 minutes. I was just reading and reading. I didn't want to stop, and those are my favorite kind of books, where I just read, I don't notice how much time is passing by, and even after I realize that I've spent 3 hours reading and doing nothing else, I want to go back and read more. But I guess I should try to summarize this book. Our main character Sam and her best friend Cassie disappear for a few days, and only Sam ends up coming back, and she comes back beaten and bruised and with no memory of who she is or what's happened. So this book basically follows her as she tries to get her life together. She finds out who she is and tries to uncover what happened to her and Cassie. And her neighbor slash used to be best friend slash now enemy, Carson, helps her along this journey. Another positive about this book is I absolutely love the characters. I expected to go into this absolutely hating the characters, but there are a few characters I hated, but they were the characters that you were meant to hate. The characters like Carson, Sam, and Sam's twin brother Scott, I absolutely fell in love with. Scott quickly became one of my favorite characters. I loved his and Sam's relationship. And you know, I would really like to know what the relationship was like when she was all bitchy, for lack of a better word, before the amnesia. The last thing I want to talk about really is the person behind all of this, because he was on my list of suspects, but at the same time it was kind of a shock when it happened, and it was also a shock of what happened to him after it was revealed who he was. There was a very big shock because I really wasn't expecting it. The only problem I had with this book is I think that with everything that happened to Sam, and after we learned the truth and how she sustained her injuries, I feel like she should have had at least 1 broken bone. Possibly like actually half a dozen broken bones from what happened to her. But, I mean, I've never really, this hasn't happened to me before. I mean, have had several accidents where I've had like fractured bones and everything. So I feel like this would cause a few broken bones, but at the same time this has never happened to me, so I can't really speak from experience. Okay, moving on from that book, I have The Darkest Star by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Another Jennifer L. Armentrout book. I was in a mood to read her books at the beginning of this year. This also went to fulfilling one of my reading challenges for the year, and that was the reading challenges of reading a new release. Now, this book, I will say right now, disappointed me. I mean, I give it a 3.75 stars, but I gave it a 4 stars on Goodreads because you can't do half stars or 3/4 stars or whatever. You just can't do them on Goodreads, and that sucks. Anyways, this book follows the main... Okay, I was gonna say main character. He's not a main character from the Lux series. He's like a secondary character. It's like you have main characters, secondary characters, and then side characters. At least that's how I see them. And I see Luke as a secondary character because at the beginning of the series he wasn't really there, and like at the end of the series, like the last 2 books, he was almost a main character. It's been a couple years since I read the Lux series, so I felt like this book actually did a good job of reintroducing me to the world without like overloading me with information or boring me to tears with too much information. I felt like it was a good balance. The only thing, if you guys have seen my reading vlog for this book and Zenith, you'll know that I spoiled myself for the plot twist of this book. And while at the beginning I was very upset with myself for that, I feel like the more I read, I was better off spoiling myself because this book was unnecessarily confusing about who the main character was, and like I said, it was unnecessary. I mean, we could have known who she was at the very beginning and that wouldn't have changed anything. I mean, yeah, it would have changed the way we saw her, but at the same time, it would have tied everything together so much smoother. I mean, I don't know. It was just aggravating knowing that she's this one character that I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but it's so hard not to because it's so aggravating because it was unnecessary. I feel like it was there to build tension when really it was just building confusion and irritation. It wasn't building tension at all. So out of all of 7, 8, I think I've read 8 of her books now. Out of all of those books, I think this is my least favorite one. No, my second to least favorite one, because Oblivion, that was Lux told in Damien's point of view, and that was just boring. But I got my review for this book pulled up on Goodreads, and I'm just going to go over the pros and cons real quick because I've already talked a lot about this book. Other than, I guess, the summary, which I had never even looked at the summary, and I'm not sure how to summarize this book without spoiling you guys. For those of you who have read the Lux series, I feel like if I try to summarize this book, I will unintentionally spoil who the main character is. So I'm not gonna summarize this book. Onward to pros. I didn't hate Sylvia as much as I expected. I actually didn't expect for the mother of this book to be included at all, so that was a shock. Not an unpleasant one because I figured, like I said, I would hate her. I didn't. The pacing was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. I love the friendships, not the relationships, the friendships. Still love Luke, even though this book got a little tedious at times. Still really like Luke. We learn more about the origins, where they were created and how they were, where they were created and how they were treated. We learn bits of Nadia's history, which is nice. And then I laughed so hard at one point in the book where she saw him shirtless, and it's like we went on and on about him being shirtless for like 2 or 3 pages, and it's like we get it. It's like you're a hormone-ridden teenager. Stop already about talking about his chest. I mean, maybe if there was a picture in the book about what his chest looked like, I would be staring at it too. But it's just a chest. It's like stare at it later, stare at it, and talk about it in your mind. We don't need to know on and on and on about how glorious it looks. We really do not. Cons about the book. Evie could be very frustrating in the beginning because she would constantly say she didn't know why she was in this certain spot or area or seeing this person at this time, and both she and Luke knew why she was there the majority of the time, and it's just like 2 pages later she was like, I was here for this reason. And it's like, I just want to go through the book and strangle her. It was unnecessary. It felt like those moments were there to just either be cutesy or to just pick up the word count of the book. I don't know, but it was unnecessary. And the last con is just the plot twist that I accidentally spoiled myself for. I felt like towards the middle of the book that it was a good thing I spoiled myself for it, because this book was unnecessarily frustrating in a way. And my hopes for the second book is it's a lot more action-packed because it's only a duology. There's no more books in this series, at least at this point. And it's just, I need more action than just like a couple of murders that really the main character has nothing to do with. This next book I read I'm not going to talk much about because I have half of a vlog talking about it, and then I have 2 discussion videos, or it's more like one discussion video that was so long I had to split into 2 videos, or it would have took about 8 hours for me to actually upload it, which at the point where I'm filming this video, only half of that's up. By the time this video goes up, the entire thing should be up. But it's Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars, and before anybody jumps me for that, this book wasn't the worst book I've read by far. It's not. And it's not the book I DNF'd either. I actually completed this book. I still have all the tabs in it, and I don't think I'm actually ever going to remove them because it's not like I can reuse them, so I might as well just keep them in the book. So if I ever decide to reread this book, I know what my first thoughts on all of these problems were. But like I said, I have a lot of videos up about this book, so I'm not going to talk about it here. Trigger warning for rape and poorly executed PTSD, and like I said, it wasn't the worst book. It wasn't the best. It was far from the best book I ever read, but there was a lot of potential, and I feel like it would have been a hit back when YA was like first becoming a thing, and I also feel like if it had had proper editing, it also would have been a great story regardless of how many cliches and overly used plot lines it used. Next is Solstice by PJ Hoover, and I DNF'd this book 28% through the book, which is 109 pages. I did rate it a 1 star because I took my time and it gave me a headache, so I felt like, you know, my time was worth something, so I ended up rating it. It was horrible. I don't understand how this book has so many 5-star ratings. I don't think the people actually read the book when they gave it this rating. I've heard that her other books are actually better than this one. I don't know what happened. Maybe this is her first novel. I don't know. I don't understand how this book got published. It was horrible. It was really, really horrible. The writing was cringy and just plain bad, and it was also very predictable and repetitive. And it didn't help with the fact that this book was written in first person. I felt like could have been done well if she didn't also make the main character Piper a whiny brat that she was just so unlikable, and she was such a weak character. And another tally against this book is the fact that it's a love triangle that is also insta-love on both sides. I mean, maybe because it's a standalone book, she wanted it to have insta-love, that way she could, I don't know, get into the more Hades and Persephone retelling of this. It's also supposed to be a dystopian novel. It takes place in Texas, where apparently it's panic-inducing for the temperature to reach over 104 degrees or something like that. I don't know. It wasn't very high, especially for a state like Texas. So I think where this book was supposed to be, it's talking about the temperature being like sky high and like killing people and stuff like that. And I think the temperatures it was doing was not panic-inducing for Texas. Maybe the humidity, like having it like 120 some degrees. I don't know what the average temperature for Texas is, but I also don't think that people would panic in the way that they completely wrap their town in a bubble and then proceed to drop bombs to like dispel the heat. Really? So this story didn't make sense in a lot of ways. I think if she just stuck with the dystopian or stuck with the retelling, it may have been good, but she kind of tried to combine both, and while that's a good idea, I really like the idea of that, this just fell flat. I'm also 100% getting rid of this book. I'm taking it to my library, so hopefully the people in my town, if someone is interested in reading this book, they actually pick it up from the library instead of wasting their money on it, because that's what this book is. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of trees. I feel so sorry for all the trees that died making these books. And that's something I never thought I would say about a book, but it was absolutely horrible. And from the reviews I've read on Goodreads, it doesn't get any better. It just gets worse. I also forgot to tell you guys that Zenith went towards the challenge of a book written by a booktuber. And this book went to fulfilling the challenge of a book that's been on my TBR for at least a year. And this has definitely been on my TBR shelf for longer than that. Now the next book I read was Cruel Beauty by Rosamund Hodge. I hope I said the author's name right. And this went to fulfilling the challenge of reading a fairy tale retelling. Now, right off the bat, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's weird. That's the only thing I can say is it's weird. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. This was not what I was expecting, especially after all the hype I heard about it. I think where this book went wrong is that it had a plot that was just way too overly complex. You didn't get to spend enough time exploring the world and the characters and this castle that our main character is stuck in. What's her name again? Nyx? Yeah, you don't really get enough time to explore this castle that Nyx is in, so you're only given a few like little tidbits of information about it, like the fact that it's constantly changing. And it's like, well, that's nice and all. It's like, why does it constantly change? How does it change? Is there a pattern to it? Kind of like the stairs at Hogwarts. Is there a pattern to like how the stairs change? Or how the house changes? Also, this is another book with an unnecessary love triangle, considering that, and this really isn't a spoiler, but the main character's love interest, I mean, this is a love triangle. So you would expect it to have 2 different people, but these are the same people that she's in a love triangle with. I mean, she adamantly feels guilty for loving either one of them for differing reasons. And it's like, why? One is the same, they're the same person. It's like one's just physical at night and the other one's physical during the day. And I don't mean physical like in the touchy-feely kind. I mean physical as in like you can actually touch him. He's not like see-through and a shadow. He's a shadow. It's like that's the only difference between them. Okay, one's nice and one's a jackass. We'll put it that way. But it was like, it was an unnecessary love triangle. It was also unnecessarily insta-lovey. I'm also glad that it got the happily ever after that, you know, comes with every fairy tale. But the way it happened was just not so much. The curse, I would have rather seen the curse be broken and everyone have kept their memories than just pressing the restart button on everyone. Because even though our main characters don't really lose their memories, it's like everyone else who was so horrible, like at the beginning of the book, it basically just pressed reset on them. And even though some of them are still mean and they still have the same poor life choices, we'll say that, they're completely different people now. They don't have the memories that they had while they were being enslaved and tortured and driven mad by this demons and the shadows and everything. It's like that definitely changes a person. And it also caused severe PTSD once all of this stopped happening. So I think this was a workaround that maybe, but at the same time it's like I don't like the thought of completely wiping the memory of people for good and then they completely change personality wise. It's just, no, they're not the same people anymore. You can't say they're the same people. They've had different experiences, different traumas up to this point. So it's basically you have a whole new cast of characters at the ending that we never get to know. Now this next book, Crimson Bound by Rosamund Hodge, is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. And it doesn't actually feel like a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. It feels like it's its own fantasy novel that has its own storyline, characters and stuff like that. I think the only thing that actually connects it to Little Red Riding Hood is the fact that at the beginning the main character wears a red cloak. That's pretty much it. I didn't see anything that actually tied to Little Red Riding Hood at all. And maybe I need to reread that fairy tale, but I didn't see any connections. Now this, I believe, is her second novel, and I can already tell that 1, the writing is so much better. 2, the characters actually have names that are pronounceable. There are a few characters in this book and like cities and towns and the country itself that's kind of hard to pronounce, but all in all, it's so much easier to pronounce these characters' names. And it also takes place in France. At least I can assume just from them saying Mademoiselle all the time. The world building, while not great, was a lot better than Cruel Beauty. And how they resolved their problems in this book compared to Cruel Beauty was a lot less convoluted. Because in Cruel Beauty, it's like, it was an A to B kind of thing. If the main character had just had the brain cells to actually connect the dots, it would have been so much simpler. Where in this book, I myself, like, there was a couple of things where I was like, okay, we can do this, this, and this to solve this problem. But at the same time, that probably would have caused other problems. So the way it happened, I was alright with. But like I said, as retellings go, this didn't feel like one, which I'm kind of happy and upset about because I wanted a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. I really wanted to like get immersed into this fairy tale again, but in a new way. Like I said, it felt like its own fantasy novel, not a retelling. And that may have also been because the magic system was kind of confusing. It was a very simple magic system that was given little to no explanation, but at the same time it was very complex, if that makes any sense. I also liked how the plot twist like all came together and how it tied in with Armand, the main character Rochelle's love interest. I'm guessing her name is Rochelle, isn't it? I called her Rachel like the entire time I was reading this book, but I think it's Rochelle. Oh well. But I really like the fact that she didn't know about anything that Armand was doing behind the scenes, and I felt like it was very, very nicely done because she didn't know about the rebellion. She didn't know about his tie to everything. She didn't know what actually happened to him. We got little bits and pieces of what could have been the truth, but was actually like a very cliff-noted version of what actually happened, and I really like that. Now, I gave this book, I think, like a 3 stars. So these are all of the books that I have read in January and February. Now, I'm still behind on my Goodreads reading goal of reading 50 books for the year, because I'm supposed to be reading 4 books a month, and as you can tell, that hasn't happened. But yeah, this video has been way, way, way too long. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!